各位贵宾，再次提醒各位，我们委员与国家人权会议立法委。
Ladies and gentlemen, the next session will start in 2 minutes. Please take your seat. Ladies and gentlemen, this session is between the ROC and the legislator as well as NHRC. Here's some housekeeping rule. This session will last about 50 minutes. In the first 20 minutes, NHRC and legislator will make presentation. In the last 30 minutes, there will be discussions or questions and answers between ROC and NHRC. There are 3 commissioners from NHRC. Altogether, you have 10 minutes. 2 legislators will make presentations. Each of them will have 5 minutes. And so, dear ROC members, you can put on your headset now. Three minutes and 1 minute before your time is over, we will remind you, so please pay attention to the reminder. Throughout the session, simultaneous interpreting will be provided. In order for interpreters to hear you clearly, please pay attention to your speed. Now, let's hand over the floor to Committee Chair.
Yes. Okay. Welcome to this very special session with the representatives of the Legislative Yuan and the National Human Rights Commission. The review committee is, of course, very interested in listening to those two, the representatives of those 2 bodies. We have read their information that they already submitted to the review committee, and we will, after their presentation, have the time for Q&A, as was explained. So I'd like to give the floor first to the legislative Yuan. Okay, go ahead.
Do you mean to say NHRC or the legislators? Professor Duick, would you like to have NHRC or legislators to speak first? We will invite NHRC to speak first. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Ye Dahua and Tian Qiujing and Fan Xunli. My 2 other colleagues will talk about, we'll introduce our institution, our response to LOI, and our concerns. First of all, On the constitution of NHRC, it officially started its operation on August 1st, 2020. There are 10 committee members, 1 chair, who is also the president of the Control Yuan, and there are 7 Control Yuan members who are the NHRC members, and the other 2 are selected. Among our responsibilities, we submit independent opinions for different human rights conventions. So throughout the past year, through forums with children and youth, focus groups, forums with government agencies and experts, we finish the independent opinion. You can download these reports on our website. Regarding the 15th paragraph in the concluding observations from the first review, so it is recommended that the second general comment should be followed, as well as the Paris Principle, to protect and to investigate issues related to children's rights. And NHRC is under the Control Yuan, but it is an independent. It is not monitored by other government agencies. Our job include monitoring the implementation of various conventions, including CRC. However, the act to exercise our power is still being discussed at the legislature. As whether or not we should have a dedicated agency for children's rights, we recommend that the government should finish the legislation in order to clarify who serves as this independent monitoring mechanism. As for the complaint mechanism, with our investigation, we realized that among all the complaints, about or only 4.6 cases out of 1,000 are children-related cases, and among these cases, only 17% are filed by children themselves. So, complaint mechanism needs to be made more friendly to children. On NHRC's website, we provide a complaint mechanism that can be made through internet, phone, or written submissions. Through some research, it is shown that in the educational system, children have trouble filing complaints because their privacy is violated, because the identity of those who made the complaints may be known, and the teachers or the campus are not very clear about how the system can be used by children. So we suggest that schools need to create children-friendly mechanism and make such mechanism public. We also suggest that the government need to add a special chapter of children's rights in the Education Basic Act in order to ensure children's rights. And also to respond to LOI 1.6, NHRC's effectiveness in dealing with violation of rights of children. We've only been operating for about 2 years, so what we can do is to made systematic visit to some institutions and schools, and we propose recommendations. And there are 2 cases that are related to human rights of children. The first is sexual abuse case in placement institutions, and the other case is how migrant workers care for their child in a foreign country. Now, to respond to paragraph 18th of the LOI, this is about the budget. Children's budget has grown from 2.12 to 2.21, but it is still way below OECD's average. And among the budget for development is very low. It decreased by 33 0.3%. So we recommend more resources to be input to protect the participation right to leisure or recreation. To respond to LOI 1.1 regarding optional protocols, and it is necessary for the government to join the optional protocol regarding the children in armed conflict, and the Education Ministry had a service program of children during wartime, so that students can help, or students between 16 to 18 can help in war in logistics. Next, we want to talk about other concerns of NHRC to respond to LOI 9.9 to prevent all forms of violence. This is about household sexual abuse. So can we ask the perpetrators or the suspect to be removed from the household instead of removing the children from the household? In this regard, we believe that the government need to implement the children alternative care policy. Removing children from the household should be considered to be the last resort. And general comment 14 of CRC should be considered to protect the best interests of children and respect children's right to be heard, and then develop a comprehensive treatment for children, the victims of sexual abuse. And in our independent opinion, 27 to 28 and 71 to 77, we do see that there's an increase of household abuse. Between 2016 and 2020, the number of children between 0 to 6 who are abused at home is increasing. And among those who died of abuse, 100% of the children are preschool children, and 80% are children who are under 3 years old. This is a very significant issue. So we want to refer to the practice in Japan. Japan has a universal visit network for newborns and their families. So Japanese and Korean practices merit our reference. I think we need to amend a civil code to forbid disciplinary authority in the household. In our independent opinion, 78 to 84, they are about corporal punishment and bullying on campus. In a survey in 2019, we realized that 71 of the reported cases of corporal punishments are for children who are under 12. And when we talk to children or students say that, or students report in the survey that 95% of teacher-to-student bullying is verbal bullying. As for student-to-student bullying, usually it is targeted at special populations, including LGBTQI students or students with disabilities. So we recommend the government to refer to the positive discipline in the inclusive, learning-friendly classroom, which is published by UNESCO. It has been translated by one of the NGOs, and restorative justice on campus should also be promoted. Thank you. In addition to calling for the government to realize human rights education, we ourselves also conduct such education. So we work with Ministry of Education. We organize film festivals and create resource programs that can help develop human rights education materials. This is a platform to create modularized educational resources. And we follow the 4 stages of human rights education proposed by the UN. I think there are a few priorities here is, first of all, we need to take inventory of the staff required to implement such human rights education. We want to invite NGOs and students to discuss together, and there should be an evaluation mechanism for the effectiveness of such human rights education. And the reports or the results should be made public. As for the course planning and training for teachers, we need to stay aligned with the international standards, have a good system to develop human rights teachers. We should also continue the surveys on human rights issues on campus. Next, we are very concerned about violence in correctional facilities. So in 2021, 6 commissioners established an NPM task force to start a pilot program to visit correctional facilities for children. We visited 8 facilities. There are several issues. For example, isolation, using restraint, and not reporting violence to the administration, collective bullying, not able to guarantee the right to be heard, and so on. So we think there should be amendment to the act that govern correctional facilities, so that the use of restraints, the use of different punishments should be clearly stipulated, and remedies should be clearly stipulated as well. Next, labor rights of children. This is a research commissioned by the Ministry of Education. Again, there are several issues here. For example, the basic wage is not guaranteed. Some of the children work until 10 p.m. Some of them work in early mornings, and their working hours and wages are not protected well as they should under the Labor Standard Act. So better complaint mechanism should be provided for children in terms of labor rights, and such an education should start at elementary school. Our conclusion, NHRC think it is very important to implement CRC, and education is the key to help with the application of CRC. So we should culture the children so that they can live in a free society and lead a responsible life. We want to work with the government, civil organizations, and cooperate to protect the basic right of every child. Thank you.
接下来我们有请
Now we will ask 2 legislators, Legislator Dr. Fan and Ms. Wang, will each have 5 minutes for their presentation. Distinguished members of the International Review Committee, Chair Chen of the Control Yuan of the NHRC, I am Fan Yun, a legislator. I'm also a member of the Education and Culture Committee of the Legislative Yuan. I would like to make a presentation on some issues of concern and recommendations. In March this year, I submitted a report including several key points highlighted in my presentation, but because of the time constraint, I will focus my talk on the LGBTI students, special education students, as well as the underage pregnant girls and the high teacher-student ratio in preschools. According to the Taiwan Tongzhi Hotline Association's survey, over 90% of LGBTI students have heard of discriminatory comments, and 2/3 of such comments come from teachers, faculty members of the school. Over 60% of LGBTI students have been harassed verbally because of their sexual orientation. About 30% of LGBTI students have been sexually harassed. As for special education students, basically they do not have enough teachers to provide them individualized assistance and guidance. In addition, when it comes to school bullying, the data is not disaggregated based on the impairments of the victims or severity of such impairments. Therefore, I believe the MOE should investigate the current situation and build relative statistics. For example, the MOE should conduct some survey of LGBTI students about their campus experience. Moreover, there should be more gender equality education training for school teachers and staff members. The special education students should also be included in relevant statistics. For example, how severe their impairments are if they happen to be victims of school bullying and sexual harassment. Without this aggregated data, we will not be able to provide adequate assistance to these students. In fact, I just returned from the UN headquarters in New York, and I learned from some international LGBTI rights advocacy groups. It seems that science should be used as the base for all policies and procedures. So the outright organizations' recommendation is in full keeping with my recommendation. So surveys as well as data disaggregation will be the first steps that have to be taken. Next, I will talk about the ratio of teachers to students in preschools. In Taiwan, this ratio has been 1:15 for 40 years. And this definitely is out of sync with the current social development trends. As a result, we have heard a number of child abuse cases in preschools. Every year, we have less than 160,000 newborns every year. However, you can see that the ratio in Singapore and Australia is 1:10, Finland 1:7, and in Sweden and Denmark, the ratio is only 1:6. And thanks to the efforts made by the Cultural and Education Committee of the Legislative Yuan and the private sector, the MOE has promised to take action to reduce the ratio to 1:12. Starting from the year 2023, and also the salaries of preschool teachers will be raised. These are all positive developments, but we have not seen detailed plans as to how this can be implemented. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Wang Wanyu. I'm also a legislator as well as a member of the Culture and Education Committee. I'm very honored to be here to express my views. I think the international review of our national report under the CRC is very important for Taiwan because this is an important step for us to be aligned with the international standards. But as a legislator, I have to point out some shortcomings in our implementation of the CRC. First of all, in 2017, the IRC actually recommends that the government should look into the causes of high suicide rate among children and youth. In fact, starting 2015 to 2020, we have seen 7 fold increase in the number of suicides among youth and children, and about 70% of these suicide cases have never consulted counselors on campus. So we hope more resources can be devoted to prevent suicide. And we know that suicide cases involve a number of different factors. Now, the social welfare system and the public health system have been making some efforts. Yet, on the educational side, we don't see enough resources and investments to allow students to have access to counselors. In addition, when it comes to the mobility environment, I don't think we have a friendly environment for children and families. For example, we have very narrow sidewalks. As a result, parents with strollers have a hard time walking through such sidewalks. In addition, how can we have supportive environment to support parents? That is another issue. Over 60% of parents have never heard of so-called family education center. As a result, parenting education is not widely disseminated to help parents. That is one of the reasons why more child abuses have been happening. Even though government has been saying that there will be no tolerance of corporal punishment in schools. However, we have received many complaints from school students because they have received corporal punishment. Yet, the school investigation often showed that those instances are not recognized as instances of corporate punishment. For example, table tennis coaches, swimming coaches have caused injuries to their students by throwing floating boards at the students or forcing the students to engage in some exercise that caused pain in their legs and feet. And the school investigation believed that those are not instances of corporate punishment. The teachers or coaches simply lost their temper. And I believe that the MOE should have more adequate measures to combat corporate punishment. Many investigations have not been effectively carried out, and investigations have taken too much time to complete. So I think the government branches must work together to speed up efforts to improve the overall system. So I hope the IRC members will pay attention to these issues in pushing our government to make improvements. I also would like to call upon the government to listen to recommendations made by the private sectors, NGOs, as well as representatives of children and youth, so that we can uphold the rights of the child. Thank you.
Now we will leave the time to our committee. Yes.
So, time for questions. Let me start with the ladies to my left. As a father of 4 daughters, I have a sensitivity for girls. Laura Lundy has the floor for one question.
As the mother of 4 children, I have sensitivity to children. My question is for Vita. Vita, you mentioned about adding a section on students' rights to the legislation on the Education Act. And my question is, what do you want to see in the legislation? Which students' rights? Is it just about a complaints mechanism? Or are there other rights that you want to see in the legislation?
Thank you very much for your presentations, both the Human Rights Commission and also the distinguished legislators. It's an honor to meet with you, and I would have so many questions, but I will actually just one to the distinguished legislator, and to ask, since you are part of the Child Rights Committee in the Parliament, what are your actually powers? What is your role there? I mean, you cannot propose legislation and reform or amendments. You can only wait for some proposals, or what is it? What is the power of, I would imagine the Child Rights Committee in the Parliament should be a very important committee. So if you can just tell us more so that we understand. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Nigel? Yes, let me first say how much the presentations are appreciated, and I think not just the presentations themselves, but the commitment that they demonstrate not only in the content of those presentations, but also in the way that they are presented. My question would go to the National Human Rights Commission in relation to the statement that the unique nature of sexual abuse in the family means that the government should implement the alternative care policy, and I think in particular in relation to ensuring that deprivation of family life or family care for a child be fully implemented as only a last resort. I would like, if possible, to have a little more of the reasoning behind this linkage of. Well, first of all, I'd like to know what the incidence is of sexual abuse in the family that leads to apparently children being removed from the family, and what the relationship is, if you like, with the full implementation of the policy on alternative care for children. My reason for asking this is simply to try to understand the significance of sexual abuse within the family in relation to the number of children, or the proportion of children who are removed from family care and placed in residential care or other alternative care settings. That was a long question. I hope it was clear, but if it's not clear, please come back to me. Okay, John.
Thank you also to both legislators and the members of the Commission for your very thoughtful presentations. You have given us many, many things to think about over the next 5 days. I'd like to raise for both groups something that wasn't mentioned in your presentations, but some of the young people have spoken to me about, and that's the impact of climate change on children's rights and the impact of the environment on children's health. And for them, it's clearly something that is considerably important. I'm curious to know whether, in fact, legislators and members of the Commission are also looking at the impact of climate change and the environment on children's rights. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, members of the committee. I have a last question for the National Human Rights Commission. The question is, how much is that commission recognized by children as a body that will really help them? And to translate that question in another one, do you think that there is room or a need for a separate children's ombudsperson. Because you also mentioned the number of complaints by children submitted to the Commission, which was very limited, and even more limited when it was about children complaining. So that is the question, and perhaps a separate body is too much for a government, not only in Taiwan but in other countries as well. So the alternative is to have a special commissioner with an own support staff within the National Human Rights Commission. So please give me some of your thoughts about that. Okay. The round of answers for certainly the National Human Rights Commission representatives and the legislative Yuan also. Okay? National Human Rights.
好，
On behalf of NHRC, I'll be brief in my response. First of all, regarding Londi's question on the special chapter in the Education and Basic Law, what's the content of this chapter? Well, after the previous concluding observations, some educational legislation has been amended on the complaint mechanism for children. However, that was more about teacher to student bullying. And it seems that those amendments didn't put their focus on the students. We think that in educational system, the subject is children, and therefore there should be a special chapter in the Educational Fundamental Act to make sure that children are the subject of their rights, and there should be complaint system as well as remedies. For example, who should facilitate the complaint mechanism? The NGOs have been advocated for many years that there should be a students or children's commissioner to help. Second, from Kenwa's question, the in-home sexual abuse. Well, in the state reports, from the analysis of sexual abuse cases from 2016 to 2020, and among the victims under 18 years old, the in-house incidences grow from 11.9% to 18.5%, which is a high increase. And in alternative care policy of the government, I think institution is the focus of the government, but foster care doesn't have that many resources. For teenagers who are sexually abused, usually they are sent to placement institutions and rarely to foster care families. So I think our statements like this is to respond to one of your LOIs, because you asked about why in the alternative care policy, why do these children of in-home sexual abuse are sent to placement organizations, because this has been the policy in the government, and there is very little kinship placements too. That after the last concluding observations, the alternative care policy has been changed. New measures are being developed, and we look forward to a better alternative care policy so that a good portion of teenage victims of any home sexual abuse can have better resources to be cared by their kinship or by foster families. Okay. The next question, about children's ombudsman. NHRC has only been in operation for 2 years. We have very diverse backgrounds among the commissioners, and there are about only 1 or 2 commissioners who have children-related backgrounds. So in exercising our power, one of the challenges is that the law is not complete. So it's difficult to create a dedicated agency or position such as Children's Ombudsman. We have been discussed it, but we don't have a legal basis to create such a position, and therefore it's difficult to just go ahead and create the position. But of course, you are welcome to recommend the creation of such a position in your concluding observations. But NPM, MCR, PDs are good reference because there could be more than one monitoring mechanism. It could be in the local government and the central government, but they can be of different size and focus on different priorities. These are my responses. And then regarding the question on climate change,
so climate change and youth and children, in fact, some representatives from children and youth groups expressed their concern, in particular air quality. And air quality in central and southern part of Taiwan has not been so good because we have a lot of heavy industry sectors in those parts of the island. So this is an issue we have to address seriously. I'm sure more NGOs and children's representatives will touch upon that issue later. Well, on students' rights and how legislation can be made to protect their rights. Well, at the Legislative Yuan, for college students, we have some new laws to make sure that there will be at least a quarter of the College Affairs Committee representatives will be students. It used to be just 1/10. However, this is still under deliberation. Many universities have expressed their opposition. As for K-12 students, I think it is important that we have more adequate complaints mechanisms. Yet overall, the rights of K-12 schoolers are not yet properly protected because teachers, parents are not yet prepared or ready. As for school bullying and sexual harassment on campus, I think the students' views are not yet fully respected and heard. For example, the student victims' views are not fully heard in some assessment meetings, and they don't get the full reports sometimes. So in terms of the Committee on the Promotion of the Rights of Youth and Children, of course, as legislators, we would like to make laws to uphold their rights. However, I think the overall cultural and social trends need to be improved. For example, we have laws to ban corporal punishment in schools, yet we still see instances of corporal punishment which are not deemed as corporal punishment by the authorities. Take children's safety, for example. Children's safety seat must be installed in cars according to law, but the installation rate is still relatively low in Taiwan. That is why more advocacy efforts are needed. For a long time, parents in Taiwan still consider their children as their property. They do not respect their children as individuals. So I think Our committee aims to help our society and parents to know better about the rights of the child. Therefore, legislation alone is not enough. That is why efforts are needed to have dialogue with different sectors of society. As for the impact of climate change on young people, I think this is a generational issue. We must make sure that children and youth have a say as to the kind of world they are going to inherit in the future. So we need to expect their views and opinions on these issues. Climate change has given rise to many extreme weather. This year, we have persuaded the Ministry of Education to pay attention to the requirements about school uniforms, because sometimes we have warm winters. You cannot ask students to wear heavy jackets on such hot winter days. So we are going to engage in more dialogues with the relevant authorities. Thank you.
Thank you for all the answers, very helpful for the understanding. A quick possibility for follow-up questions. Laura, you have a follow-up question?
Time?
Yeah, we have 5 minutes.
Does anyone else have a burning question?
Sure.
John?
Don't ask the permission. Go ahead. Very short.
Thank you
Very short.
Just going back to the issue of the possibility to have a specific ombudsman for children. Just a quick follow-up question on the possibility for a separate ombudsman for children, because we didn't hear in the first place, and maybe we will hear more tomorrow, and we cannot read from the documents. This is why it's important that you tell us. How does your office look like now? How many people you have? How many of people who are in your office actually work on children's rights? This is what we need to know on permanent basis. I'm not talking about those who are guests, you know, maybe commissioners or. So we need to understand that, and then we can maybe understand what's the next step and what is it that we can propose to the government.
Okay. Other.
I can ask one? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just really briefly, thank you for raising the issue of preschool and early childhood education. And we note that there has been a massive increase in preschool education, and you're concerned about quality. I have some questions about the training of the staff. What is the required training to be a preschool teacher in Taiwan? And is it a university-based qualification? I note you raise a question about salary, and I'm curious there too.
It's more a comment than a question, but in relation to the informative response given on the question of sexual abuse in the family and its linkage to alternative care. It would be good, I think, if we can examine further the possible responses to sexual abuse in the family. I mean, obviously, apart from preventive efforts, and to see what the contribution of kinship care or enhanced kinship care might be in those circumstances. I don't think that it's necessarily the panacea, nor indeed foster care, for various reasons that I can't go into now. But looking at how we might enable the child to remain in the family home rather than the child being taken out, the perpetrator being removed from the family home might be one response, but in at least certain cases. But I think that it would be really important to look to delve deeper into this question of how you respond to a child victim in his or her family situation, whether or not you remove, whether or not you try to help on the spot, and if you do remove, which might be the panoply of possible settings that you would want to consider in order to protect that child and to protect the rights of that child. I think so. Okay. Quick reactions, quick questions, quick answers from both the National Human Rights Commission and the legislative Yuan, and you have each 1 minute and 30 seconds.
好，我代表 NHRC 简。
So on behalf of the NHRC, I would like to answer the question about the full-time manpower devoted to the promotion of children's rights. Well, we have 42 full-time staff members, but the law says we can have 57 staff members. Right now, for this independent opinion submitted to the IRC, we have 5 full-time staffers helping with us. So we don't yet have designated any staffers to work on certain conventions. Basically, it's task-based division of labor. The teachers for preschools, according to law, they must have relevant certificates. Otherwise, the preschools may be fined by 30,000 to 300,000 NT. As for the salary, there has been new regulations to raise their salaries. Basically, 28,000 to 35,000 NT per month. That is the salary level for preschool teachers. However, we don't have enough preschool teachers in any case. Now, again, on preschools, I think in terms of our education and culture, we don't have enough competence to know about the education for preschoolers. As a result, preschools are the dominant players in determining the quality of education for our preschoolers. In fact, for most preschools, low salary, low benefits programs for school teachers, long working hours for teachers. Most of them have to work over 8 or 10 hours a day. During lunch break, many such preschool teachers cannot rest at all. They don't have overtime pay either. 70% of them say that they don't get overtime pay. So if we want to encourage families to raise kids, we need to have quality preschools. Moreover, well, the 28,000 to 35,000 NT salary level is for childcare centers. If for preschools, it's 30,000 to 36,000 NT per month.
Far than up, more than up.
是，现在呢，我们
Unfortunately, I have to stop this discussion. We could continue. The members of the committee would have a lot of questions for the rest of this morning for you. But now the non-governmental organizations, I think, should have the floor. Madam.
谢谢，感谢各位参与本场的会议。我们现在
Thank you very much. We will take a 10 minutes break. We will rearrange the seating. Please bring your belongings outside the venue. The next session with NGO will start in 10 minutes. If you are not to attend the next session, please return the headset. Thank you.